Thanks for joining the session today. We'll get started. I have a number of slides for you. So this is all new content I put together over the past couple of weeks. Actually, just finished this presentation a few minutes ago. So just adding the latest and greatest to it. So let's go ahead and get started. So just a little bit about our company. I started this company, applied all that 22 years ago to build better software around Essbase. We're employee-owned. We have no external investment, which means we report to customers and not investors, which is refreshing for a lot of our customers. Everything is done in-house as well, so we don't outsource anything. That's kind of the culture of the company. I've been around doing this now for quite some time. I've actually been using Essbase since 1984. I wrote the original demoware for the classic Excel add-in way back when, but I'm the Dedeca visionary, done a lot of other things, but recognized for it in the ACE program and the Microsoft Excel MVP program. I was actually one of the original 5 MVPs in the world for Excel. A lot of people read my blog. Amazingly, I still get tons of hits on it, thousands a month, and I haven't written a blog entry in years now. So I've been pretty busy, both with my hobbies. I'm a skier. I live in Colorado in the wintertime, actually, and ski every day while I go in to do meetings and that kind of stuff. I'm also a new grandpa. Actually, in the last few years, I've become a grandpa a few times. So I had a lot of fun playing with my grandkids, but I've become an Alzheimer's caregiver as well. My wife, I know many of you probably know her, was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's. So a lot of my time now is taken up being an Alzheimer's caregiver, which it kind of sucks, but you know, that's what I have to do for the next period of my life. In any case, my wife, by the way, was very instrumental in this company. She took care of everything to let me really start up a company, and really, I was a workaholic for years. So, you know, this is kind of payback now for me to work and help her a lot. In any case, she went to every solutions conference, by the way, except for one, every Hyperion conference since 1996, I think, except one for her. I've been speaking since 96 at the Essbase conferences. And in fact, just this past weekend, we're at our storage unit, and I happened to look in a box, and I found this. Actually, it's my badge from 1999, so I should put that on to feel official, right? My solutions badge. I also found the ticket, or the little badge you had to wear to the party, which was at the Universal Studios back then. So kind of a throwback. We do have a giveaway. We have a little quiz thing. You can go out and register and win a $200 gift card from MasterCard. That link has been copied into the chat window by Julie Jacobs, our director or VP of Business Development. So she put that out there for you to click on it. You can win a gift card. All right, so let's get started with the agenda we put together for you today. So, you know, really, you know, we live in the spreadsheet world. Our company is focused on spreadsheets and Essbase, so we see a lot of spreadsheets. We see a lot of stuff. So I'm going to talk about what we're seeing in spreadsheets and what the issues are that we see. And we think it's kind of a hidden issue. A lot of people may not realize that they have issues. Then we talk a little bit about how Essbase interprets the worksheet. So there's some misunderstandings from people about how Essbase actually works. So Essbase is a technology that people have used, but not everybody really understands what happens under the cover. So I'm going to give you a little kind of quiz and a lesson on that. And then we'll talk about some design tips that we've learned over the years for spreadsheets and some things that can help you save some time and hopefully save a lot of maintenance. So let's dive into spreadsheet issues. So I just put together this informal poll. We didn't really have time to get the poll over to Interroll and get this into the session, but I want you to think about these questions. Well, when you create a new report in Excel, what happens? Do you copy an existing report, or do you start from scratch every time? My bet is most people copy a similar report. I mean, I used to be in consolidations. I did this stuff, right? So we copied things all the time, started as a basis for another report. So, you know, we used shared drives and all that kind of stuff. And so we had tons and tons of reports to select from, right, to create and copy from. How about this question? Do your users love Excel links? So a lot of people use them, or you know, some companies forbid them. My first actual customer with this company back in March of 1998, March 1998, a long time ago. I was hired to come in and build a system. It was a budgeting and forecasting system on top of Essbase. Back then it was Visual Basic, by the way. The company had an existing system that was doing consolidations and reporting. It was 1,200 workbooks that were linked together, 1,200. Actually, the person who maintained those links was going kind of crazy. We helped them put that into Essbase and make a more logical system. Years and years later, I actually had contact with that person and hired her to help us with tech support. So links are actually evil, though. They're bad, in case you didn't get the gist of that. And then, the workbooks seem to be getting bigger. And we see that a lot. I think a lot of people have noticed that the workbooks are getting bigger. So let's kind of move on to talk about those issues in more detail. So this reuse really contributes to the increased spreadsheet size. And let me tell you a bit why. It's really kind of the main cause. Workbooks accumulate stuff, junk. They get a lot of junk in them. Because what happens is people will create a workbook, they'll use it, they'll repurpose it, use it for something else, but the stuff that they used it for the first time, a lot of stuff just hangs around. So I'm talking about range names for one, right? Range names are bad because you don't really see them most of the time, right? Unless you need to create a new one, and you create it and you go on. But those names that may have been used previous, reuses of that book, stick around. Custom formats and custom styles. That one's really been problematic, most likely because there was an Excel macro virus that went around in the early 2000s that added custom formats to workbooks. So that was kind of bad. I've seen a lot of those as well. One that's pretty common that people don't really understand as much is formatting out in the far reach of the sheet. You have a slowness in your worksheet, or your sheet seems to want to print the entire workbook all the way out to, column, whatever it is, and row 1,048,576, right? What happens is formatting may get copied out there, and Excel recognizes that it's the last cell, and they'll try to use that. And that can have effects on your retrieval times in Essbase. Smart View data streams. So whenever you do something in Smart View, you connect to a source, retrieve some data, there's a bunch of stuff that actually gets written into the workbook. So and I'll actually go into more detail about what that stuff is coming up in just a second. The biggest thing we've seen though is workbook links. This is the thing that really caused us to move along to something in our product line. When you go break a link in Excel, you think you've gotten rid of the data, but what happens is it doesn't really go away. And this is really kind of the cause, along with all this other stuff, of what I call EZD. I coined this term and actually was communicating with the specialist in the world in spreadsheet errors, Dr. Ray Pinko at University of Hawaii. He thought that was a great name. EZD, it stands for Excel zombie disease, because this stuff lives forever. I mean, these range names, these formats that are dead, the Smart View data streams you might not be using anymore, those workbook links in particular, they never go away. And we have documentary evidence of that. Probably in your workbooks, most likely you'll see it, because we see this just about everywhere. So this is an example, by the way, that we got from a customer. I've changed the names so it's not recognizable, but these links are really bad. So like I mentioned, they're not deleted when you break the link. So look at this workbook. The last cell, or sorry, the selected cell in this case was K25. That was actually the last cell in this worksheet. There was only one worksheet in the workbook. There were no hidden sheets or anything like that, right? There were no links that were apparent, right? Nothing at all. But when you look at the disk, what happens is you see that this file was 19 meg. It's huge. It's unbelievably huge. So how do you go and find out, what this stuff does and really what this garbage is? Well, some people know this, some may not, but the XLSX file format for Excel is actually a zip file. So you can change the extension of that file to .zip and open it up in something like WinZip and take a look inside and see what's there. There's a lot of information. There's a lot of different streams of information, a lot of embedded files, or almost all XML files, by the way, inside that file. What it looks like is this. So this is a simple, that's actually this exact workbook I just showed you, that 19 meg workbook. Opened it up and notice that there's a styles XML file. That one's pretty normal. You look up above that though, and I didn't put a highlighter on that, but up here, there's an external links directory. So if you have external links or have had external links in the past, that directory will be present. So if you open that directory up, what you're going to see is you're going to see a bunch of XML files. And you can see there's one in there that's huge. In fact, there's the huge amount of that file packed in that XML file, right? There's also a directory, by the way, that contains the location of where that was linked from. So that's important. Now, the thing about these is that, these files, you can't just delete them. Because if you delete those XML files just willy-nilly without deleting possibly range names and that type of thing that refer to that information, then you could get workbook corruption. You notice that these files actually are ordered in numbered systems. There's a unique, there's a sequential number system to them. If you break the sequential number system to them, it actually breaks the workbook as well. So, Yeah, one final thing I want to say about these particular files is if you're poking around in VBA, you can't see these. They're invisible. Actually, the first instance of what I tried to do in response to this was I wrote a VBA application that went out and looked at the number of styles and looked at the number of ranges and the number of pound ref ranges and how many ranges were hidden and all that kind of stuff. I could get that information through VBA, but I couldn't get information about these links that were dead. So it's just not possible. So I did want to show you what SmartView stores as well. So this is just from one simple retrieve, by the way, this particular set of files. As you can see inside the file, and this is actually the largest one there is custom property 5.bin. This file shows the data that was in that retrieve, just a simple sample basic retrieve, but actually it shows numerous layers. So you see all the pipe delimited things in the middle here. That actually passes back not just the member names and the data that you see, but it also passes back attributes, among other things. So attributes are the things that cause you to be able to see cell formatting for styles and that type of thing. It pushes back, calculation statuses. You see that in there. There are custom formats on the data. You can see that. You can also see, what else is in here? There's smart list. If you're using smart list information would be stored in the same format. So it really stores at least 2 instances of the data that you see in SmartView. All right. Now there is a reduce Excel file size option in SmartView. Really, it doesn't do a lot to reduce the file size. And the reason for that is these files are actually compressed by the Excel file format anyway. So what this reduce file size option does is it does its own compression, which is only slightly better than the compression that the Excel file format does already. So there's not a lot of benefit to add there. Now, how do you find this stuff? Well, a couple of different analyzers out there. Microsoft has one that's built in called Microsoft Excel Inquire. If you have the right version of Excel, that is. And then we've actually built one ourselves. So this Inquire add-in is really available only in Office Professional Plus and Office 365 Enterprise. I actually had to go and get a special version of Office so I could do some screenshots. I did this about 3 months ago. I got that. And also the thing is it does some reporting, but it doesn't offer anything to clean it up, right? So you can go see what's in there. In this particular workbook, this one I showed you earlier, you can see the 7 links, but you can't do anything about them. So it doesn't let you clean them. So what we decided to do with Dodeca in our product line is, and especially in light of I couldn't do anything in VBA, decided to write something that would analyze and optionally clean the files. So it gives you the opportunity to go through and really do more than just find these issues. So this is a screenshot of an analysis workbook. I just want to point out for this particular screenshot or this particular file, there's some things on this particular file. There's that compressed size of the file that we see, right? That was that big file that we saw with the data in it from the link. But you take a look, and this is actually data from that link's subdirectory that tells where the file location is located. So look at this. This file was sent to us. We got this actually in the fall of last year. Fall of last year. There was a link to 2016. Was it valid? Did it do any good? Who knows? But then you start looking at the other things. There's a link to 2004, some labor spreadsheet, and there's a 2005 link, and there's a 2009 link, and there's another 2016 link. And then there's something else in here I thought was funny, an A drive, a link to the A drive. So anybody remember floppy disks? Somebody linked to a floppy disk. And believe me, this isn't the only one. I've seen a lot of that kind of thing in the past. So this is kind of some of the issues we're seeing inside these spreadsheets and why we actually decided to build this analyzer. I probably had a developer working at least 6 months full-time on this analyzer, by the way. What I was able to do is actually take and compare a directory of files. So basically, I just went through one of my directories I have with some customer data, some customer example data, and other stuff, and basically said, hey, give me every XLSX or XLS file that I have in my directory. I copied them and ran this analysis. Actually, I had my developer run the analysis. 602 files. So it ran through the entire directory structure. And this is a summary sheet that we actually put out in these analyses that when you run a directory, you can do comparative. So you can see what's going on. So you can see, and I did clean up, kind of made it so it's hard to read the books, but there's, a lot of worksheets, and we put some, these red flags, conditional formatting. We kind of took a stab at what we think is bad. So, having a lot of worksheets, I kind of say, no, that's kind of bad. Anytime you have hidden worksheets, that's probably pretty bad as well. So Excel are very hidden worksheets. Some people don't know there's actually this thing in Excel called very hidden worksheets, where developers can hide the worksheet using VBA with an option that makes it so you can't unhide it in user interface. So that's what a very hidden worksheet is. We don't see a lot of those. We do see cell counts that are pretty big. This one down here was extremely big, the 17 billion cells. That's a workbook that has formatting out to the very last row and column that's possible. So it's like row 1,048,576, and I can't remember what the maximum column is, but styles. There's a lot of styles in some of these workbooks. These are indicative of those old, macro viruses, right? There are a lot of files that have links and range names and pound ref range names. Probably you've seen those before, right? Did you know those can actually be hidden? They're hidden range names. And then custom properties. This 265 is probably the max that I've seen in a file. That custom properties, those are the smart view files, by the way. But my guess is there's a lot more of them out there, right? So this is kind of an analysis of what we found for the min and max in that analysis. So the max I saw in hidden worksheets was 19. That's quite a lot. Who knows what's in them? I've seen customers using Excel files. They'll give us we'll look at it and say, oh, there's all these hidden worksheets. What do they do? Oh, we don't know. We have no idea. So we just don't remove them because it might break something. That's probably a familiar refrain, right? There was that 17 million cell count. Styles, I've seen 63,000 plus styles in a workbook before. So we thought that was significant. Links, I saw one recently, they had 363 links in it. So that was big. Range names, the same workbook that had 363 links had 106,000 range names. A lot of those range names, by the way, reference data was in the links. So I've had people ask me before, yeah, I didn't know this stuff was in here. Is it really bad? I don't know. Doctor tells you you have a terminal disease. Is it really bad? If you didn't know before, you didn't know, right? But it's probably pretty bad. It could be bad. Hidden range names, bad. Pound ref names, custom properties, that type of thing. So these are the type of things we see. So this is a little video, by the way, of that analyzer. Just wanted to show you what it does and how it works. So this is that 19 meg workbook. So it's going to go ahead and just run it in the workbook analyzer, which has a bunch of options for cleaning it, analyzing it, that type of thing. The analysis probably pretty much is the same, but you can clean it. And when we clean it, we put it into a different new workbook. We don't actually rewrite the same workbook, but you can clean a bunch of bad things out, a bunch more bad things. You can even do pattern matching on defined names and remove those. Run the analysis, runs for a minute, pops up a directory that's got the cleaned file. So notice that clean file is now 12K. It used to be 19 meg. That's how much junk was in that particular workbook. So if you're having trouble with workbooks taking a long time to open, that might be, that needs to be cleaned out like that. So this analysis workbook, let me show you what that looks like. So this is actually a video that shows the analysis workbook and some of the stuff that comes out of it. So you're going to see some of those same things we saw before. I did a screenshot of this to actually show, the 18 meg, that type of thing. And then further down, you can see some things that are red. Let me have the video real quick. I think we kind of looked through those things, right? But going down further, we're starting to look at the range names, and the range names are referencing these things as well. So all the things that are in red, by the way, are basically bad. So things that we found that are pound ref, for example, and can be removed safely with no issue whatsoever. Some things may be used, like this reference to this HTML last update that says 10.6.98. Yeah, who knows? That might be used in your workbook. We don't know. So we don't remove that automatically. We do give you options to remove it, though, if you want. All right. So that's the workbook analyzer. It's available in Direct Spreadsheet Management System. And if you're a Direct Excel add-in user, certainly you have access to Direct Spreadsheet Management System for administration purposes, so you can use it there. If you have some workbooks that you think are just particularly bad and you want us to analyze them and optionally clean them for you, send us an email. We'll send you we can do. I'm really interested to find like the world's monster workbook. So what's the worst one I've seen? So the worst one I mentioned earlier, 363 links, 106,000 range names. There's got to be some out there worse than that. So, I thought about actually having a contest as part of this presentation, but it's a bit hard because, we probably have to sign NDAs and that kind of stuff before you can give us the spreadsheet, so that type of thing. So how to avoid the issues? Well, don't use workbook links. That's the first thing. Links are spelled EVIL. I mean, they're really bad. And that's been my position since my early days of Excel consulting. I actually started doing Excel consulting full time back in 1994. I worked for a company whose largest consulting customer was Microsoft. We did spreadsheets and spreadsheet applications that Bill Gates used personally. So it was our maxim never to use workbook links for any reason because of this problem. So even way back then, we recognized that. But also try not to copy workbooks. It's a basis for a new workbook. When you do that, you bring all that junk along. But if you are copying, copy ranges, but be very careful because you can copy the values in the format fine. That's not a problem. That doesn't bring anything with it usually. Might bring some of the styles maybe, but that's going to bring probably only ones it uses. But copying formulas, what happens when you copy a formula from one workbook to another? It creates a link. So a lot of times, so you want to be careful with that. That's a really bad thing. You can remove unused SmartView information. So you can go into the SmartView dialogues to see information. You can actually delete it. It'll prompt you to delete information in this sheet or on all worksheets in the workbook, so it's not too difficult to do. And also, one of the things that I try to do when I'm creating a workbook application or workbook with an application is once I'm done doing everything, I'll go out to the last, actually the row past where I've got data, right? And I'll select everything to the bottom of the sheet and I'll delete it. And I'll go to the column that's at the end, delete every column to the right of that, so that it'll reset the use range that Excel recognizes. You might have accidentally copied some garbage out to one of those stray cells way out in nowhere land, and that really can cause issues with retrieves. So, all right. So next I want to talk about how Essbase interprets the worksheets. There's been a lot of confusion. Essbase is kind of a free-form tool that people can use out in the world, and it's kind of the value you get out of it's what skills you have, right? So a lot of people don't get a lot of training in Essbase, frankly. So it's something that is probably problematic. So I'll start off with a quiz. So what's the fourth quarter actual margin for New York COLA in this particular spreadsheet? So I'm going to give you just a minute to look at that and think about it. So fourth quarter actual margin, New York COLA. I've asked people this type of thing in front of audiences. I've used this same type of spreadsheet for a long time, for probably 10, 15 years. I remember doing this same type of thing in a Dallas user group meeting back in the mid-2000s. 1,040 is what most people say, right? The actual answer is it's not on this worksheet. So let me tell you why. Once you put in the headers that go across the top and put actual in top of quarter four, notice that number is not 1,040 anymore, it's 1,184. And why is that? Well, a lot of people may misunderstand how Essbase works. So accountants are notorious. I'm going to back up one second. So accountants are notorious for making the worksheets look pretty, right? So literally, when I created this worksheet, I said, well, what would the standard accountant do? And let me see if we get my mouse here. Standard accountant would retrieve this thing. It would look maybe a little bit different, but we'd have what's called pyramid headers in Essbase. And they would put actual over here on the left and COLA over here and budget over here to make it line up and look pretty, right? But the problem with that is the data retrieves wrong. In fact, what happens is it's retrieving the budget number. You see the budget number is the same over on the right as it is here on the left. I go to the next screen, that's actual, right? So how does it work? How does it actually work? How does Essbase think about this? And how does it determine what's there? So I decided to create this graphic to kind of show you how it works. So when you do a retrieval in Essbase and you're trying to get some data back, Essbase works through data intersections, right? So it has to go and search the worksheet and figure out, okay, what do you mean? What do you want? You have all these labels on the worksheet, but where does it go to get the data? How does it know which cell gets which data? And it follows this general algorithm. So let me show you how it works. So if it's looking for the cell for, for margin, for quarter four, for COLA, for actual, right, for New York, it'll start in that cell and it'll look to the left and it finds margin there. And it says, oh, I found margin. That's from, the measures dimension. I'm happy. I have a measures dimension member. I go back and we start looking for another dimension. I'm going to go further left. I find New York, and it goes up until, because there wasn't anything, by the way, in A6, it goes up to A4 and finds New York, and it's happy. It's got a market dimension, right? So that's reasonable. And by the way, the algorithm always goes up. When it looks for the year dimension, it goes up the column and it finds quarter four. It says, hey, I'm good. I found a year dimension member. Next, I'm going to look for more members. So it goes up and it looks left and it doesn't find anything. First of all, it doesn't find anything in F, right? Column F. So it looks left to column E. Doesn't find anything there, so it looks right to column G. And there it finds budget. And that's how you actually end up with this budget. Finally, with COLA, what happens? It goes up, doesn't find anything, goes right, doesn't find anything, goes left 2, doesn't find anything, goes right 2, doesn't find anything, goes left 3, finds COLA. And that's how actually Essbase thinks. All right, so that's how it interprets that worksheet. And that's how people get fooled a lot of times. So my recommendation is to use block headers, all right? There's a setting in SmartView that lets you do block headers on columns. There's not one in the classic add-in, but in SmartView there's a setting that lets you use block headers that pulls those back automatically. All right, so that's a nice thing. All right, so let's move on to spreadsheet design tips. Let me check my time just to make sure. Okay, good. So the things we see out in the real world, and we see a lot of bad things, but this is the one that probably I think is the worst offender, is the report sheet, retrieve sheet paradigm. I'm going to talk about some things we've seen that are just horrible. We see it in almost every company. There's reasons for that, because in the early versions of SmartView, they really didn't have this use Excel formatting option. What happened is it just formatted data the way it wanted to when it came back. So it always put fancy borders and that kind of stuff around the data, and people didn't want that in the reporting, right? So you did a retrieve, and then you had another sheet with formulas linked to it to create the report. That's the birth of the report sheet, retrieve sheet paradigm. Back in the old days of the add-in, we saw some of that, but not probably as much as we started seeing in SmartView. So the reasons not to use it, well, it's pretty prone to error. So if you think about, what Excel does and how it works, especially when you're writing formulas, let me just pop over to Excel real quick. I'm actually going to do a new worksheet. Notice when I select a row and or a column, there's some guides there. And when I'm writing a formula that references the same row and the same column, so if I do this, there's some visual guides up here that guide to say, hey, I'm in the right column, right? So that visual cue is very important. The research spreadsheet errors have found that when people write formulas that reference a different row and different column, so if I come over and reference that same range over here, right? You don't get the same visual cue that you're in the right column or row. So they found that there's a lot more likely people make mistakes in those cases. So that's one thing, right? It's kind of the same concept, by the way, of why I recommend block headers. So let me just back up just a little bit. Look back at that block headers. Block headers, you notice in block headers, you reference a row and a column, you actually see the member names that roll up into that particular intersection, right? So it makes it more accurate. Back to where I was, all right? So these report sheets and retrieve sheets require more maintenance. So let me tell you about what we see with those. I've seen a workbook that was being used with the classic add-in. It was one retrieve sheet. It had 250, 270 report sheets hanging off. It was a cascade report, right? And essentially what happened was they kept adding, they were actually locations, right? So as the company added locations, they'd add a new worksheet. And then every single number on that worksheet was actually a VLOOKUP back to the retrieve sheet, right? There were a lot of those sheets that were dead, they had no data. But when we talked to the people who maintain this worksheets, those finance people, they're like, well, we don't want to touch the worksheets because, you know, we didn't design it. And if we break it, we're in big trouble because these are used by executive management. It was horrible. It was a horrible work thing that they had. In fact, it was so bad that there was actually two different guys that had two different versions of the spreadsheet, essentially kind of two different looks and feels of it, or two different points of view or something. And they actually had a separate computer just to run that report because of the time it took. It took 4 hours. Well, first of all, it took an hour to open the file. It took 4 hours to retrieve the file. It took an hour for it to calculate. It took another hour for them to do processing afterwards. So it was a 7-hour turnaround if everything went perfectly, just to maintain that workbook. It was awful. We turned it into a cascade and it resolved in 90 minutes with no extra work. So we did it with a cascade. It was just a lot easier. So the maintenance is a big, big issue. It makes the spreadsheet less flexible as well. I'm going to talk about that when I have another slide coming up in a few minutes that shows a screenshot of what I mean by less flexible. So it limits the usage of how you can reuse workbooks. Because a lot of times when these report sheet, retrieve sheet paradigms, you've got formulas on one sheet linking to data on another sheet. You can't really insert new things into that worksheet. You can't insert new columns, that type of thing very well to add new business units or something like that. So that's kind of what I mean by less flexible. I'll get to more of that. And then I talked about the monster spreadsheet, but we've seen a lot of monster spreadsheets. I have another client. They gave us a spreadsheet that they said, well, if you can make this work, then you've got the job. We'll buy Dodeca. That worksheet was an Excel file that internally it took 5 minutes to open it. We never got it open successfully, by the way, without killing the links first. We actually had to bypass all the links because it started popping up links. I mean, it would pop up a link and you'd have to hit a dialogue, and then it'd think for a minute and pop up another link. You'd hit another dialogue. Links were like, I saw one to Deloitte Online /2005, something. It's like, and that's not going to be used, right? And there was another one that was, Chinese. I'm like, has this been hacked, this particular workbook? We didn't know what the heck was in it, right? So those are monster workbooks. And so you want to not do this report sheet, retrieve sheet paradigm because of that. We recommend instead that you use embedded Sbased member ranges so that you can keep everything on the same worksheet. And just like I showed you in that block header sheet, you can put those Essbase headers in so that you can look up and down the columns, across the rows. You can see all the members that roll into a given intersection. That makes it easy for you to understand what's there, but makes it really easy for internal audit, right? When they come calling where these numbers come from, you don't have to go tracing back to formulas on another worksheet, or you don't have to go trace and try to replicate a VLOOKUP that might be happening on another sheet that really is unauditable, right? So that's why we recommend those. Also, significantly reduces the maintenance. They're just so much easier to deal with. So let's take a look at what one of these report sheet, retrieve sheets look like. And my guess is probably a lot of people have seen things like this, probably have them in your company. So pretty common to have instructions on this worksheet. I saw one recently that had, actually preparing for this, it had, I don't know, like 2 pages almost of instructions on how to run the report. It was awful. So go ahead and connect. So I filled in some parameters by way of connect. Let's go ahead and we'll do a retrieve. Refresh the data. All right. Finally, you have your report. So that's kind of the retrieve sheet, report sheet paradigm. So, one of the questions I have on this one is, what would happen if you wanted to have an income statement for maybe a cascade for the East region or something? So you wanted to have New York and, Massachusetts and Florida and all those types of things as part of, your report. You want to have a tab for each. Well, the retrieve sheet, report sheet paradigm really forbids that. You can't really do it. You'd have to actually create another worksheet. You'd have to create another copy of this file, copy it yet again, right? instead of having them all in a cascade tab. So, you know, that would be pretty arduous to actually create something like that in this format. So that's why I recommend against it. So the steps to convert. So the good news is you can take those report sheet, retrieve sheet type things, and you can convert them to, you know, this embedded style, because you have all the information there anyway, right? It's just a lot of times it's either VLOOKUPs or something like that. So you can add rows or columns and put them inside your report labels, and I'll show you an example of this in a minute. So usually we format those with a different color just to distinguish them from the cells. Distinguish the color of the cells with the members so that we know to hide it later, because you can hide all that stuff, right? You want to make sure you know what's hidden. Sometimes you can use, you know, Excel grouping to hide them as well. So that's a nice thing. Take the formulas that are referencing your control sheet. So I have a control sheet of mine, and do a copy paste special on them. So if not, what happens when you delete your control sheet a bit later in steps, you're going to have pound ref errors. So you kind of want to know what's in those cells, right? Delete those sheets, go through control and retrieve sheet after you've copied in the members, right? Did I even say copy in the members? I kind of implied it here, I guess. Select the range containing the members, and in Smart View, you can create a multi-grid report. So you create a multi-grid report, it remembers the area that's highlighted, it'll retrieve only that area, right? In Dodeca, you can create what's called a retrieve range. It's just a range name in the workbook that signals Dodeca where to retrieve the data. Kind of serves the same purpose. So depending on which tool you use, it can be a little bit different there. And then you can hide the Essbase header rows and columns. So it's a nice, pretty report. So those are basically the steps. Oh, one final one. If you're using Smart View, you can save the file as an Excel template file. I'm not sure if many people are aware what template files are. Once you get this nice cleaned out file, you've cleaned out all the links and all that kind of crap as well. Save us an XLTX file. That template file is kind of like what you see when you open up a new file in Excel. So when you open up a new workbook, you get book 1, book 2, book 3, right? You can have a custom template that has your Essbase headers and all that kind of stuff, your report essentially as a template. So when you open a new one, it's going to be income statement 1, income statement 2, whatever. Alternatively, if you save it as an XLS X file, you could just save it as read only. That way, when somebody uses the file, they go to save it, they're going to get prompted to do a save as. All right. So let me go, and I think I had a demo of that as well. So let's go ahead and run this demo. So this is actually one of those XLTX files, an Excel template file. So I'll just double click on it. It's going to open in Excel. I found that they changed the behavior of Excel. It used to be when you just open the file, it would open it as a template. Now it opens the XLTX file if you do a file open from Excel. So in any case, I'm changing some parameters, doing my Smart View refresh because, hey, the multi-grid has already been set up in the template. I'll save it. I hit save, notice it says save as, right? It doesn't let me save it over on top of that file. So I give it a new file name and save it. And this way I'm not dirtying up my template, in other words. So I've got a clean template. I can keep it clean. I can make some changes. I've got some, you know, right here, I've got some Excel grouping, so I can open up or close those hidden rows and columns. In the real world, I would hide this one as well, this C column, so you don't see that. All right. All right. By the way, if there are any questions, make sure you type them in the question box. I haven't been watching it, but all right, let's go to the next sheet. So I want to talk one more thing about these retrieve sheet and report sheets. Let me see what time it is. All right. All right. The flexibility issue. So I talked about flexibility previously with the retrieve sheet, report sheet, and this is kind of an example that I created based on something I saw at a customer site one time. It was really kind of disturbing, to tell you the truth. It was difficult. What happened is they had this report, right? This report that had actual budget. In their case, they had forecasts, they had various dollar variances and percentage variances, right? They might have had current year, prior year as well. Then they had this pattern, it was like 9 columns wide, but then they repeated it going across the sheet like this sheet shows. So the market, the east, the west, etc. The thing is they had a report sheet, retrieve sheets. They had essentially formulas that referenced into the retrieve sheet going across the top. And this company, by the way, it was top level business units only, top level. So when we started looking at the report, there was a series of columns that were hidden, and we asked, what's wrong with this? Why are these columns hidden? Did you even know they were hidden? They said, oh yeah, that's a business unit we don't use anymore. You know, being a logical person I am, trying to reduce spreadsheet size and all, I said, well, why didn't you just delete it? They said, well, we're afraid we're going to break the file. They're going to break the retrieve. So that was a problem, first of all, right? So what we ended up doing, and we did this in Dodeca and automated it, you could do something similar probably in Excel and just take a lot more VBA coding. But we made it so that there was a single template, and we embedded the retrieve and the retrieve headers and that type of stuff in hidden rows and columns, and essentially made it so that the user could pick what level they wanted to see in the business unit. So instead of seeing just the top level business units, this particular company had 8 generations of business units, all the way down to the city level, right? They're kind of a geographic type thing. Well, they had never been able to do this type of analysis at any place other than the top level because they were locked into this retrieve sheet, report sheet paradigm, and they just didn't have the manpower to go out and create these types of files and then maintain them, by the way, when their business units changed at the lower level. So when we did this automation, like I said, we did it in Dodeca, right? You could do it in Excel VBA. It'd take a good bit of code, but you could do it. They could actually get onto 8 generations, any one of the 8 generations, and see the same type of format for any generation. It just opened up the analytic capability. It was one spreadsheet template, by the way. So I just can't say enough about how the retrieve sheet, report sheet paradigm, and actually my label says retrieve sheet, yeah. Retrieve sheet, report sheets was supposed to say how bad that is, all right? So I did have one more tip to leave you before we go. I don't think we got enough time for that one. And that has to do with Sbased members and how you dynamically calculate members. So another thing we've seen from maintenance that people do is sometimes they'll have spreadsheets that have rolling forecasts or something like that, right? So they'll have, maybe pick a base date and they want to go and look forward 18 months and backwards 12 months, right? So we've seen people have date tables in a lookup sheet. So you pick this date, this is the month and year, so many dates back, so many months back, that type of thing. And they'll run their entire retrievals based on these tables, right? But they have to maintain those tables, which is kind of a pain in the butt. You have to make sure they change it, make sure they're right, that type of thing. Well, Excel has a bunch of functions that you can use to actually do that. And so we do this a lot with customers, is to use Excel functions to calculate member names that are date related. So instead of using lookup tables. So the Excel functions we use most commonly are date value, end of month, text, also left and right at times, all right? So the date value function, let's talk about that first. So what that function does is it takes a string that looks like a date and converts it to an Excel date. So what's an Excel date? Anybody know? So an Excel date is the number of days since January 1st, 1900, all right? Actually, if you do a time function in Excel, it's a fraction. It might be October 22, 2020 at, what time is it? 1:44. It might be something like 44,126.62130. That might be the exact time right now. I don't know how good at guessing I am at fractions, but you get the idea, right? So the date value lets you take a string and make it an Excel date, all right? Then the end of month function. This is the key function that kind of enables this. End of month function takes and computes the last day of the month, obviously, right? But it also lets you give an offset. So it's not just the end of this month or the end of the month if you specify for your date, but you can say, I want to take this date and I want to specify what the date is 3 months ahead. So 3 months from now, what's the date? So today is, according to Excel, it's day 44,126. End of month, comma 3 gives us January 31st, 21, or it's equivalent in the numbers, right? And you can format those numbers to look like dates. We also use the text function. So then you can use the text to go and grab those dates and format back the Sbased members, right? So you can use the MMM function or argument with text to get back the 3-digit or 3-character month name. You can append FY on and get the 2 digits of the year and get back FY21. All right. So those are different things that we see used a lot. So here's a spreadsheet that we've got, and I just did a little video of this one. So and this is kind of the process that we see this happening in. So, and if anybody wants a spreadsheet, by the way, I can make this available. I think the slides can be made available as well. I haven't sent these over yet, but I will right after the session. I can make the spreadsheet available as part of the package. So maybe Robin can comment on that at the end. So how does it work? So I just numbered the steps through the comments. So first of all, you have a date. So you can either put a token here in Dodeca, or you can just modify the date. By the way, I did want to comment. If you're using SmartView and you have, these should actually work if you have these in like a point of view orientation at the top, side by side, you should be able to pick those as well with the point of view selectors in SmartView, all right? So these are just essentially member names, right? So it's kind of, think of this as your base date. So we're going to take that date and we're going to calculate off from it. So first of all, we take the date, the month, and put it in 15 because every month has a 15 in it. The year, not the year, plug that into the date value. I get back my date value, and the end of month function is going to take the end of the month, right? So based on that, I get back a date of 2/28/2019, right? These are the months of the year. These are used further down in the calculations, all right? Actually, it's used in this calculation. It's used to compute the month end date. So in this case, I'm just using the month here and plugging in the same date value, using end of month to get the end of the month for essentially my columns in my report, right? So far, so good. All right. Next. Writing a formula to say, hey, is the date that's computed for the base date up here at the top, is it less than or greater than the date for the month in my report? And getting back a true or false, okay? So this is actually going to be used, I'm gonna stop the video for just a second. This is actually gonna be used in a formula to determine whether it's actual or forecast, right? So the member, it's not just the date members, it's actually actual and forecast in this template, changing based on the date. All right. So change April, notice now I have actual through April instead of through February like I had before. All right. Also, I've got my fiscal year. I changed my fiscal years. Notice everything changes. My member names change down below because we're taking those dates, right? This date right here, and we're using the text function down here to compute the dates for the years and for the months. And that's essentially how you can really eliminate maintenance on some of those templates that you may have, especially the rolling ones. This algorithm, by the way, with end of month, works very nicely when you go and cross the boundary of a year, right? If you're looking forward 3 months from October, you're going to go, November 2020, December 2020, January, goodbye 2020, hello 2021, thank goodness, right? But the end of month function actually handles carrying that over. So that's a great thing as well. So one less thing you have to think about and worry about. So, all right, so those are what I had for my design tips, and ready for any questions that we may have. So let me be sure to go fill out the giveaway, by the way. I think there's a link in the Q&A or in the chat. I'm not sure which one. So it looks like we have some questions.
Yes, it was in the chat. So Julie Jacobs put the Q&A or the raffle drawing question in the chat. And then Tim, we have one question. What is the limit of how many tabs you can cascade?
What's the limit of how many tabs you can cascade in Excel?
Well, this came in about 20 minutes ago. So.
Oh, yeah. So the limit of how many tabs you can cascade in a cascade report in either Dodeca or the SmartView add-in, Dodeca Spreadsheet Management System, by the way. It's really limited by memory. Now, what we've seen, and I have way more experience, by the way, with the classic ad than I do with SmartView. And so, you know, there really isn't a limit unless SmartView runs out of gas in SmartView. Now, the old add-in did. I mean, you had I don't remember what the hard limit was, but, you know, essentially you'd run out of memory at some point. And the memory was kind of tied more to the Essbase retrievals than actually the memory of the data in the worksheets. In Dodeca, I've seen cascades of 1,000 probably or more sheets. I mean, I regularly do one in demos. I used to do one in demos. They were fairly small retrieves, but it was like 475 sheets, and I just do it live in a demo. So if you want to see how those work, I'd be happy to show you that. But yeah, officially the number of tabs in a cascade is limited based on the number of Excel, the number of memory that the Excel file can hold a sheet in the data tabs. So,
Okay,
all right.
good. All right, good. Any other questions for Tim? Just type them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. Well, it looks like you were very thorough. There are no further questions. So thank you, Tim, so much for joining us. And I want to encourage everybody to stay tuned for our next presentation at the top of the hour.